They told her she could have power or love, but never both. And when the enemy army appeared at her borders, she made a choice that would haunt her forever. In 1187, there was a queen who ruled one of the most powerful kingdoms in the Mediterranean. She had everything: wealth, influence, armies at her command. But there was one thing she wanted more than anything else in the world, and the moment she reached for it, everything fell apart. This is the story of Queen Sibylla of Jerusalem and the impossible decision that tore her apart. Picture this. You're 27 years old, and you've just become queen of one of the most important kingdoms in the world, Jerusalem, the holy city. Christians, Muslims, Jews, everyone wants it. Your kingdom sits right in the middle of a massive conflict that's been going on for almost 100 years. The pressure is insane. But here's the thing. You didn't ask for this. You never wanted to be queen. You just wanted to live your life with the person you loved. Sibylla was born into royalty, sure. Her father was the king of Jerusalem, but she was a woman in the 12th century, which meant she was basically a chess piece. Her value wasn't in what she thought or what she wanted, it was in who she could marry. That's how you made alliances back then. You traded your daughters like property. When Sibylla was just a teenager, they married her off to some Italian nobleman named William. She barely knew him. Didn't matter. It was political. William died less than a year later. Sibylla was a widow before she even turned 20, and she was pregnant. She had a son, Baldwin, named after her brother, who was now the king, and for a brief moment, Sibylla thought maybe she could just fade into the background, raise her kids, stay out of the spotlight. But then she met Guy. Guy de Lusignan was a French knight who came to Jerusalem looking for glory and land. He wasn't royalty, he wasn't even that important, but Sibylla didn't care. For the first time in her life, she got to choose, and she chose him. They fell in love, real love, not the arranged political garbage she'd been forced into before. They got married in secret because they knew everyone would lose their minds, and they were right. The nobles hated Guy. They thought he was a nobody, an outsider, unworthy of marrying a princess. Sibylla's brother, King Baldwin, was furious. He tried to annul the marriage. He offered Sibylla other options, better options, men with power and land and armies. She refused every single one because she loved Guy, and for once, she got to make her own choice. But here's where it gets complicated. King Baldwin was dying. He had leprosy, and back in the 12th century, that was a death sentence. He was rotting away slowly, and everyone knew it, which meant someone had to take over. And because Sibylla was his sister, she was next in line. The kingdom was already falling apart. There was this Muslim leader named Saladin who was uniting all the armies around Jerusalem. He was smart, ruthless, and he wanted the holy city back. The Crusader states were barely holding on. They needed strong leadership. They needed someone who could unite the nobles and keep the kingdom from collapsing. Guy was not that person. The nobles made it very clear, if Sibylla became queen, they would not accept Guy as king. They'd rather tear the kingdom apart than let some French nobody rule over them. They had other candidates in mind. Sibylla's half-sister Isabella was married to a powerful lord. The nobles wanted her on the throne instead. So, Sibylla had a choice. She could step aside, let Isabella take over, and live quietly with Guy. Or she could take the throne and fight for her right to rule with the man she loved. She chose to fight. When King Baldwin finally died in 1185, his young nephew, also named Baldwin, became king. The kid was only 8 years old and already sick with leprosy. He died within a year, and suddenly there was no one left. The throne was empty. The nobles gathered in Jerusalem to figure out what to do. They knew Sibylla was next in line, but they refused to crown her if it meant Guy would be king. They came up with a plan. They told Sibylla they would make her queen, but only if she annulled her marriage to Guy first. Then, once she was queen, she could marry someone more suitable, someone they approved of. Sibylla stood in front of them all, the patriarch, the lords, the military commanders, everyone watching, waiting to see what she'd do. And she agreed. She said yes, she would annul her marriage to Guy. She would take the throne alone. The nobles were thrilled. They thought they'd won. They organized the coronation immediately, before Sibylla could change her mind. The ceremony was set. 2 crowns were brought out, one for Sibylla, one for whoever she would eventually marry. The day of the coronation, the church was packed. Everyone who mattered was there. The patriarch placed the crown on Sibylla's head and declared her Queen of Jerusalem. Then he handed her the 2nd crown and told her to choose a husband from among the assembled lords. Sibylla took the crown. She looked out at all those nobles who thought they'd manipulated her, and then she turned and placed the crown on Guy's head. The room exploded. Nobles were shouting. Some stormed out. Others demanded the coronation be reversed. But it was too late. Sibylla was queen and Guy was king. She'd outsmarted them all. It should have been a victory, a triumph of love over politics. But the problem was, the nobles were right about one thing. Guy was a terrible king. He had no experience, no political sense. He didn't understand the delicate balance of power that kept the kingdom together. And within months, everything started to fall apart. Saladin was still out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Crusader states were divided. Half the nobles refused to follow Guy. Some of them even left Jerusalem and set up their own territories. The kingdom was breaking into pieces. And Sibylla could see it happening. She could see that her choice, her defiant, beautiful choice to marry for love, was destroying everything. In 1187, Saladin made his move. He brought a massive army to the borders of the kingdom. Every available knight, every soldier was called to defend Jerusalem. Guy was in command. Sibylla begged him to be careful. She knew he was over his head. But Guy was desperate to prove himself. He wanted to show the nobles that he was worthy of the crown. So he made a catastrophic decision. He led the entire Crusader army into the desert to confront Saladin at a place called the Horns of Hattin. It was a disaster. The Crusaders were surrounded, outnumbered, dying of thirst under the scorching sun. Saladin's forces crushed them. Thousands of knights were killed or captured. Guy himself was taken prisoner. The kingdom was defenseless. Within weeks, Saladin's army swept through the Crusader states, taking city after city. And then he marched on Jerusalem. Sibylla was still in the city when Saladin arrived. She watched from the walls as his army surrounded them. She knew it was over. There was no one left to defend them. No army, no hope. Saladin offered terms. He would spare the people of Jerusalem if they surrendered. Sibylla had no choice. She opened the gates. Here's the thing that kills me about this story. Saladin actually released Guy from prison. He could have executed him, could have kept him locked away forever, but he let him go. And Guy came back to Jerusalem just in time to see everything fall apart. Sibylla and Guy fled the city with whatever they could carry. They ended up in Tyre, a coastal city that was still holding out against Saladin, and that's where Sibylla had to face the full weight of what had happened. The nobles blamed her. They blamed Guy. They said the kingdom fell because she chose love over duty, because she put her own desires above the good of the realm. And maybe they were right. Maybe if she'd married someone stronger, someone more experienced, Jerusalem would still be standing. But here's what they don't tell you in the history books. Sibylla never regretted it. Even after everything, even after losing Jerusalem, losing the kingdom, watching thousands of people die because of decisions her husband made, she stayed with Guy. She never left him. In 1190, there was a siege at the city of Acre. Disease broke out in the camp. Sibylla's 2 daughters from her first marriage got sick. She nursed them both day and night, and she watched them both die. A few weeks later, Sibylla got sick too, the same disease, and she knew she was dying. Guy was by her side. He'd lost everything, his crown, his reputation, his kingdom, and now he was losing her, the one thing he'd ever really had. Sibylla died in that camp, far from Jerusalem, far from the throne she'd fought so hard for. She was only 30 years old. So here's what I can't stop thinking about. Was she wrong? Should she have chosen differently? Should she have put the kingdom first and married someone she didn't love? I don't think there's a simple answer. Because the thing is, even if Sibylla had married someone else, Jerusalem was probably doomed anyway. Saladin was too powerful. The Crusader states were too divided. The fall of Jerusalem wasn't really her fault. It was decades of bad decisions, political chaos, and impossible circumstances. But she got blamed for it, because she was a woman who chose love. And women weren't supposed to do that. They were supposed to sacrifice, to be obedient, to put everyone else first. Sibylla refused. She took the crown, married the man she loved, and dealt with the consequences. And yeah, those consequences were brutal, but she lived on her own terms. In a time when women had almost no power, no choices, no voice, she made her own decision and stuck with it. History remembers her as the queen who lost Jerusalem. But maybe she should be remembered as the queen who chose herself, who refused to let her life be decided by a room full of men who saw her nothing more than a political tool. She loved Guy until the day she died, and maybe that's worth something. Maybe that matters more than a kingdom. I don't know. What do you think? Was she selfish? Was she brave? Could she have saved Jerusalem if she'd made a different choice? Or was it always going to end this way no matter what? The truth is, we'll never really know. But what we do know is that Sibylla made a choice that most people couldn't make. She chose her heart, and she paid for it with everything. If you want more stories like this, go ahead and subscribe.